Hi, you're watching Current Issues. My name is Vineet Malhotra. First, the demonetisation as a policy was criticised, and now the constant changes in the scheme have received brickbats. The RBI and the Finance Ministry continue to introduce new rules in the policy and then making arbitrary amendments one after the other. Moreover, the government seems to be shifting its goalpost every now and then. Earlier, the objective of demonetisation was curbing black money and counterfeit currency. Now, the focus has shifted to promoting digital economy. But are the banks prepared for a transition to digital economy? And was demonetisation a knee-jerk reaction or a well thought out, well schemed government plan? Here's our report.
"43 days and 60 notifications. The opposition has gone hammer and tongs over Prime Minister Modi's decision. Rahul Gandhi, Mamata Banerjee and Arvind Kejriwal standing fiercely against the government. People have lambasted the government and the RBI for regularly changing rules. On 12th November, the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says that there is no need to rush as the deadline is 30th December. On 20th December, the RBI asks, why did you take so much of time to deposit old notes? The Swaraj India President Yogendra Yadav posted this message on Twitter, which went viral. Fierce reactions on social media and more chaos at banks have forced the RBI to roll back on its latest caveat on 5,000 deposit limit. Former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram believes that whoever implemented demonetisation did not know elementary economics. After supporting demonetisation initially, Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu said that this is not what they wished for and that the solution to problems due to note ban remained elusive even after 40 days. Credit rating agencies of international reputation like Goldman Sachs, Fitch and Moody's believe that demonetisation will lead to economic slowdown. Now let's see how ill-prepared the government was to address the consequences of making 86% of India's circulating currency illegal overnight. As of present, we have 2 lakh crore rupees in new replacement currency. We have only 2 lakh ATMs and more than half of them are not working. Those that are have not been recalibrated for accepting new currency. Bihar has only 6,600 ATMs. Rajasthan has fewer ATMs than Delhi. We have only 1 lakh bank branches to cater to 125 crore people. Well, with just 9 days left for the exchange of old currency, we hope that demonetisation will bring cash worth of billions of dollars in unaccounted wealth back into the economy.
So let's not delve into this debate, the constant flip-flops, the amendments. This probably was the 60th amendment made by the RBI since 8th November when demonetisation was kicked into action. And Sharad Kohli, economist, is with us in the studio. Mr. V.K. Suri, economic expert, is also with us in the studio. Sirs, thank you so much for joining us and being here. Mr. Narendra Taneja of the BJP is also joining us. Mr. Taneja, thank you for talking to us. Sharad, let's begin with you. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb over here. You have been a very vociferous, a very vehement supporter of demonetisation as a concept. And, most of us agree that as a concept, it's fabulous. It's got far-reaching effects and benefits for the Indian economy. But what's really frustrating for the common man who's been standing in lines, who's been filling up those deposit slips, is to find out that when he left his house to go to the bank, there was one rule, and by the time he reached the bank, there was another.
No, going back to this 5,000 rule, which is now eventually been revoked. I mean, it wasn't a carpet ban on deposit. You could always deposit once, and let's go to the bottom of it, because why this flip flop has been happening. I mean, you call it flip flop, but people have been finding ways and means to try and escape the provision and try and find a way in the sidelines.
So
and
that
try
only
and
means
bypass.
Sharad, that these possible contingencies, these possible ways to circumvent the system were not computed before the scheme was launched. This only goes on to say that.
Maybe to a certain extent, I do agree to that. I can't completely disagree, because if you anticipate the problems which somebody might try and take advantage of a provision, then obviously you can anticipate that. But then coming back to this 5,000, the most recent flip-flop, what had started happening was that people were still receiving old currency. There were a lot of businesses who were still receiving old currency, which is no more a legal tender. After 11:59 p.m., 8th of November, it was no more a legal tender. So therefore, it is illegal to receive that currency. Secondly, there were queues piling up. There were a lot of people who had still not deposited. There were NRIs who were traveling here for Christmas, who had cash lying here and wanted to deposit. And there was a black and white change also happening. People were trying to exchange the currency. People who were having cash in hand in their books of account, they were trying to lend that cash in hand to other people to let the cash be deposited. So there was a whole lot of bungling going on in the whole process. And I think giving one opportunity in the next 10 days was not totally unfair, if you see. I mean, after all, how many days do you want to go? You want to go on 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th? What are you trying to do? Are you going to pick up your notes from here and there? Or you are trying to bypass the provision and trying to breach the legal tender provision, and you're trying to misuse the whole thing. So therefore, the flip-flop no doubt is there. But then people are, it seems, cleverer than the government, and they find ways and means to get past it.
Okay, Mr. Suri, let's get an economic perspective on these recent flip-flops, and then of course we'll go to Mr. Narendra Taneja of the BJP and figure out what he has to say in his response. Mr. Suri, over to you, sir. Like Sharad Kohli said, that he does agree with me when we spoke of that, the pre-planning that went into demonetization was, a far cry from what it is today. So probably there is a big lacuna, there is a big gap between the implementation and the execution of the scheme.
So it was such a big reform and such a bold step that you just cannot compute, you just cannot oversee what will happen in next 40-50 days. So as the scheme goes on, you need to make the certain changes. Certain changes were required and certain changes were not required even. For example, that exchange of the notes, it was required at that time. All the companies, all their workers, they were not working in their factories. They were standing in the queues with the IDs, fake IDs also, and getting the money converted. So that is the huge amount they have converted. So that step was very right. Now, yesterday the 5,000, day before yesterday the 5,000 note, 5,000 amount was to be deposited. Only once you can deposit more than that. That point only had one aspect, that the people, small vendors, people used to go to them, aapka account mein how much money you have in your account. He says, I have deposited only 40,000. Okay, mera 40,000 mera bhi jama karao. So like that, there were queues and queues. But there is one drawback in changing the norms, if they are not very much required, that the credibility of the Prime Minister and credibility of the Finance Minister, once you say something and unless and until it is affecting very seriously the scheme, you should not change it. What happens with that? Once you make a change, people start manipulating, thinking about other things, and the rumors go swelling on. Like we show every day that the people have been caught with the 2,000 notes, lot of 2,000 rupee notes. So some of the messages and some of the rumors were that the 2,000 note will also be banned. So panic will create. So
there is panic, and of course, the flip-flop, the constant amendments and changes which are happening, in fact, fuel all these rumors. And Mr. Taneja, let's get a perspective from you on this, sir. And before I, actually ask my question, let me quote to what Mr. Chidambaran had recently said about, demonetization, and I'll quote him verbatim. It is like a surgeon operating upon a patient without knowing whether the patient has any disease at all, which part of the patient is affected, and what kind of surgery is required. The analogy that was presented by the former finance minister in front of you, sir, how do you respond to that?
Well, Mr. Chidambaram saying what he's saying, at the same time the party at the very outset had said they support the demonetization. So flip-flop, actually this should be used for the Congress party, because they'll be saying one thing on one day, quite the other thing on the other day. So we really know what their stand is on the issue. Look, there are two, when it comes to demonetization, I just want to explain one thing very clearly. There is a policy and there is execution. These are two different things. As far as the policy is concerned, practically every single party except Samajwadi has supported demonetization move. Majority of people of India, more than 90% people have supported the demonetization move. So there is absolutely
but
no
sir, only
disagreement
recently
on the
Chandrababu
issue,
Naidu has withdrawn his
practically all
support.
across
Sir,
the country.
only
Now,
recently,
I
sorry,
move to
sorry
the,
to interject
just a
you,
second.
sir.
No,
Mr. Chandrababu Naidu has withdrawn his support for demonetization.
Just check your computer the last 5 minutes. He said he never said that. He's supporting it. He has always supported. This is just came in 3 minutes ago. 3 minutes ago. Please check it. And coming back, the second part is execution. When it comes to the execution, and when you're executing such a massive policy and such a massive change, there are bound to be certain hiccups, because after all, the system that we have got, the banking system, we inherited from the Congress party. We try to modernize, reform, that we could, but at the same time, this is what we got from the Congress party, which they have developed since independence, mostly because they've been power most of the time. But my point is, there are people, there are rotten eggs, there are black sheep, there are some people, they think they're smarter than the government, there are some people, they think they can innovate, there are some people, what we call in India, jugadus. So what happened when they come out with their genius and attack the government policy, then you have to respond to it in order to make sure the policy is successfully implemented.
Right.
It's nothing. What you are calling flip-flop is not flip-flop. It's basically responding to all those jugadus, all those people who basically try to overbeat, to try to outsmart the government. So then you have to act. And this is precisely what the government and government agencies and RBI, which is an autonomous body, independent body, they have been trying to do. It's nothing more, it's nothing less.
Okay, Shama Mohammed, I saw your finger go up, but it is your turn to speak, and let me also extend to what Mr. Chidambaran had said, that we are the distinguished company of Zimbabwe, North Korea, Libya, and now Venezuela. These are some of the countries which have exercised demonetization, but they were not able to reap too much benefit out of it. Shama, your turn to respond.
Yeah, first I want to start on with one point which you keep saying, that this is what we have inherited, this is what we have inherited. We have done a wonderful job. We've been in power because we've been voted to power. We've been elected to power. We have not conquered. First point. Number two, in 2004, when we got to power, you were in power, India was shining. Why didn't the people of India vote you back? Think about it. Whenever you've come to power, it's whenever there is some sort of incumbency is when you've come to power. So if you've really been doing well in 2004, you should have come back to power. Or you should have come back to power in 2009. So let's stop this nonsense about what the Congress party has given us, the banking system. The Congress party has done a lot for this country. So stop putting the Congress party down. If you're very good, you would have come back to power. Number two, what is happening right now is, in science experiment, we have got something called trial and error. And there is a trial and error happening with the people of India. Now, when you have a tsunami, it is something which comes all of a sudden and you don't know how to work on it, or a terrorist attack, which is like what we had at the Taj. That is something unexpected. Now, this is something which the government of the day planned and they executed, and they know they were removing 86% of the currency which was in use. So when you're doing something so monumental, if you cannot plan it, what is the credibility of the finance minister and the RBI? And the RBI? You can't keep changing things. The 5,000 thing was done on the 19th. It's been changed today. It's so many flip-flops. You have to have some sort of planning. You know that you have been doing something. That's why he said such a monumental thing with 86% currency being removed. Then they should have been proper planning.
Okay,
what is the government of the day doing?
Okay, Mr. Narendra Taneja wants to respond to you, Shama, but I have a question for you as well.
We are not guinea pigs where you can do trial and error.
Shama,
people of India are not guinea pigs, Mr. Taneja. They are human beings.
The Honorable Prime Minister of India
please.
also said that if demonetization was probably initiated in 1971 under Indira Gandhi, we wouldn't have had the black money mess that we are facing today.
So the demonetization was also done in 1977, isn't it? Under the, Morarji Desai also did it. Did we not have problems after that? Was it cleaned up, the system? We removed the 1,000 note. The 1,000 note was reintroduced. So why don't you talk about that? Why do you get Mrs. Gandhi into everything? Mrs. Gandhi lost power in 1978, but she came back in 1980. If she was not so good, why did the people of India vote her back in 1980 after the emergency? So please stop blaming the Congress party. The BJP people have nothing to say, just blame the Congress party. So if demonetization, then Mr. Morarty Desai did it, it did not help. We still have corruption after that. So what we need to do is not demonetization, but what we need to do is find out why this black money is generated in the first place. Why there is a demand in our country for black money. That is what we have to look into. That is the bigger picture. You know, tax reforms. Why people are not paying income tax. So these are the things. This is called shock and awe. What this government does is shock and awe. Suddenly shock you with something, and the poor people, they don't understand.
Okay, Shama, Sharad wants to come in. Okay, Shama, Sharad wants to come in and respond to what you just said.
May I just correct the note which was demonetized back in 1970s was the 10,000 note, not the 1,000 note. So just wanted to correct the facts there. It was the 10,000 note.
No, 10,000 and 5,000.
Big amount. That was a
10,000
small
and
currency.
5,000.
Yeah. So it wasn't
Not a big
1,000.
amount.
So we just said 1,000.
Yes,
No,
and it happened in
10,000 and
1978,
5,000
not
was done.
77,
Look,
Shama.
He mentioned why didn't Mrs. Indira Gandhi do it in 1971? I was rebutting that. Why Mrs. Indira Gandhi didn't do it in 1971? When it was done, it did not work. By
Shama,
Morarty
that was not a
Desai. Why do you
question.
have to
That
bring
is what
Mrs. Indira Gandhi into everything?
Shama, that was not a question for you. I was quoting the Prime Minister of India. That is what he had to say, and I wanted your reaction on that. Mr. Taneja,
sorry.
Mr. Taneja wants to
That
come
is
in
what
now.
I'm trying to say.
Go ahead, Mr. Taneja.
I hope we'll have a civilized debate and I'll not be interrupted. You see, the point is that the people's mandate, the people, they are the mandate is the final mandate. And what people verdict is the most important verdict in democracy. People of India had voted us and voted Congress out. Congress today is a dead force that we saw yesterday and what happened in Chandigarh. It's a dead force. So I understand when you are basically pushed in the kind of corner you're pushed into, when you're being pushed into the Bay of Bengal, into the Indian Ocean, into the Arabian Sea, frustration is very clear. I can see the frustration, you know, in the
Maharashtra?
in the language, in the
We won
voice
the third
of the Congress
phase of the Maharashtra
spokesperson.
Palika
But I
elections.
don't. Let's be.
Mr. Taneja.
Let's have a civilized. Be civilized. I hope you have not. Be civilized. I didn't interrupt. If you want to discuss this way,
No,
I'm not
Okay,
going
Shama,
to
let him finish. Shama, you have to let him
I
finish.
don't believe in
Shama, you have to let him
uncivilized
finish.
But I need to come in.
Please
You
continue.
got to get me a
You
chance
are
to speak.
uncivilized
Shama,
party. You are
have to
uncivilized
let
party.
Mr.
You want to
Taneja
have
finish.
uncivilized.
Shama, you
I
will be
don't
given an
want to be part
opportunity
of
to
any
respond and
uncivilized
speak and
debate.
put your point across. Okay, Mr. Taneja, go ahead. You won't be interrupted, sir. Finish your point and then we'll go to our economic experts.
Thank you. The point important, your Congress party has been basically working on a conspiracy against, you know, the economy of this country. Why did they otherwise? When they came to power 10 years ago, what they did that time, when you look at the percentage of high denominator, 500, 1,000 crore, only 36%. In 10 years, they pushed it up to 86%. And the result was that when we got into power and we looked at the whole thing, on the top of it, they have scandals, scams totaling 12 lakh crores. We had absolutely no other alternative but to clean up the thing. Because the one taking it from 36 to 86 and then scandal and scams were 12 like 1,000 crores. So in such a situation, we had absolutely no other alternative. We know we are paying the price. We know the people are being inconvenienced. We know that at the same time we are at the receiving end because all these parties have got together. All these corrupt parties have got together. Corrupt politicians have got together targeting us. We know that. But we are going to face it and ultimately we're going to come out and the people of this country understand. We mean business. We want to clean up the system. All the dirt that Congress basically, conspired and worked for, we want to clean it up. And that's why every single Indian except the Congress party, some people are conspiring against that. But so be it. We're not bothered about it. And we're not bothered also about the frustration that's so visible in the, in the voice of some of these people, including the Congress party leaders. Look at what Congress party leader is saying today. Is on television the last 30 minutes. But my point is that we are not really, our focus is on demonetization. Yes, there is some inconvenience to some people. Yes, there are some hiccups. Yes, there are some loopholes. We are addressing them as we go along and wait for some time, wait for another 2-3 weeks. It is going to be very smoothly done. And still, if there are some issues, we are in touch with the people of this country. We're explaining to them, and whatever we need to do, we will do. As far as the Congress is concerned, it's a dead force. Congress is history. Sooner they realize it, people have realized it. Sooner they also realize better
Okay.
it will be for them.
Okay, Shama, I'll come back to you. Sharat, of course,
I
one
wanna
of the
come in,
reasons,
Vinny.
one of the narratives for, promoting
I need to
demonetization is, the digitization of India. And, you only said that we don't want to be a cashless economy. We want to be a less cash economy. And often we compare ourselves, we set precedents with other countries. If we talk about Sweden, Sweden is probably one of the, the very few cashless economies in the world, but the population, is less than 10 million people. And if we talk about digitization of India, we also have to look at the kind of penetration cell phones, smartphones have in our country. Less than 25% of the people in our country have smartphones. What about the remainder 75% of the people? What respite do they have? Is that an area, or is that a direction that the state, the government needs to work on? In fact, equipping those people, empowering them to have some sort of a digital gadget in their hand to conduct all these transactions. Without it, it's useless.
No, let me first go to the, which is in relation to what you just said, the changing of the goalpost. So I'll give an economic perspective to changing of the goalpost, because we've been hearing this goalpost for a very long time now.
Right.
Now, you see, when you're looking at cutting down the total quantum of cash in the economy, India's cash to GDP ratio is about 12 to 13%. And which is very, very high if you compare to some of the other countries. So we are now looking at a situation where the same amount of cash is never going to come back to the economy. You probably have a cash to GDP ratio of 8 to 9%. So Vineet, when we are going to cut down the cash, obviously the concept of less cash or cashless has to creep in. Now, coming back to what you said, that the categorization of the Indian population, the formulation of the Indian population, when we are looking at the rural belt, see, mobile phones and online connection, internet is not the only means. You must have heard of the recent Aadhaar based payments. In an Aadhaar based payment, 100 crore people, more than 99%, 95% of the people have Aadhaar cards today. So you just go with your Aadhaar card, everyone's got a thumb, put your thumb and the payment is done. So there have been alternates which the government has proposed. I'm not supporting government, I'm just talking of the concept as a whole. There are ways and means where you can still do the payment without being properly educated, without having a mobile phone, without having a computer, without having an access to an ATM or whatsoever. So therefore, it is a step which has to be taken at this point. When we achieve fulfillment, when we achieve perfection, is to be seen in the years to come. This is a good step taken. I don't say that we're going to achieve this step on 31st of December. Well, the whole country is going to be digitalized. No, that's not going to happen. We are in a transition phase. This is going to take the transition to digital economy, cashless economy, to my mind, is going to take a few years down the line. And I think it is a good step, and eventually we will head to that bill. When we compare Sweden, you just named Sweden, which is 98% cashless, with a small population. But it must have, let's not forget, it must have started at some point, 1960s, 70s, it started that move. Today, after 50, 60 years, it has reached that stage. So let this be a beginning. Why should a beginning be thoroughly criticized? Minus, of course, the shortcomings, the pitfalls which have been there in the scheme. But the scheme per se should not be criticized outright. That's my feeling.
Okay, well, we actually are, Sharad, not trying to criticize this initiative. We are probably, agreeing to disagree. And Mr. Suri, since 8th November, there have been a lot of ripple effects, if I can call them, because of demonetization. The winter session, did not conclude any of the bills. Very few bills were passed. The GST is probably going to be delayed from April to September. How is the state, how is the government going to reconcile, the way things have backtracked for them?
See, I will agree with Sharad that it will be a less cash economy. It cannot be a cashless economy. There is no possibility. It is just a beginning, and we need to see how we proceed further with it. I will come back to the point that the black money was to come out of this scheme. So I feel that only a part of the black money will come out of this scheme. And further steps, further reforms are required to contain the black money. There should be the steps that the black money is not again generated. So that requires the further steps to contain the black money. Some black money will certainly come out. The only best point of this scheme appears to me is a jolt, a very big jolt, a very big blow to the terrorists. They have been halted. They are cashless now, and they are trying to loot the banks. and which too they have not been successful. So, another good point will be that the counterfeiting of the notes with these new notes, it will be more difficult, it will be very difficult to counterfeit because of the certain features in these notes which at this moment cannot be discussed in public, that what are those security features. So, these 2 points have a it is a for the scheme, they are the positive points. Black money is coming out, people are being caught with the huge money. So, money has come into the system, money has come to the accounts, money is with the government. Now, we have to see that how they spend this money for the poor as they are.
Well, so the government, as retailed by the RBI is not going to get any dividends. Whatever the tax is going to be collected, from the money that's coming to the banks, that is what the money the government is going to get. And Chama, you wanted to come in. Chama, another question I wanted to ask you was,
Yeah, I want to come in.
A lot of states are going to be election bound. A lot of states are going to be election bound, Shama, and the topic of demonetization is going to be high on the Congress's agenda. Even if we talk about UP, the alliance between SP and Congress is something that's going to gain ground because of demonetization. Do you think it has somewhere down the line some benefits for the Congress party?
No, let me say one thing. What Mr. Suri said is that terrorism has come down. Now, after demonetization, we had Nagrota, and I think 3 days before we had Pampur. So, on what basis does he say that terrorism has come down? Terrorists do not use always Indian rupees. They can use dollars. They can use anything they want. And terrorism happens across the border. You have to understand. Number 2 is counterfeiting. He said this rupee cannot be counterfeited.
There's a development which we have to go to. Sharad Kohli, Mr. Suri, Mr. Taneja and Shama Mohammed, thank you for joining us. So let's